You feel this nervousness on the phone there?
Sir, I've been trying to make an urgent phone call up there.
Well, I don't think it's something I want to do on an overseas phone.
You gotta make some phone calls. Hang up the phone. Prank caller. Prank caller.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Packernet After Dark. This is the call-in show, the Packernet Podcast Network. If you'd like to call in, if you'd like to participate in the show, please feel free to do so. The phone number here is 608-501-0718. New callers go directly to the front of the line. We don't have any new callers today, but we've got Kyle from Madison.
Hey, Ryan, Kyle from Madison, man. How are you?
Good.
Well, today, it's been a little bit easier than I thought dealing with that loss yesterday. It's Monday afternoon here. I don't know when you get to this. But I guess maybe part of that's just because I was a little more mentally prepared, and even if they won, there was no world where I was really entertaining a Super Bowl run. So I guess I kind of emotionally inoculated myself a little bit. You know, that said, like I said last week, Colin, and I thought the Packers had it was below 50-50 shot, but just, I don't know how you handicap it. Maybe they win 4 or 4.5 times out of 10 or something. And I think that's true. I think we saw that yesterday. They were still in that game for all the warts and all the bad luck and all the injuries. They were still in that game until late into the third. I mean, sorry to say, but they were. And a couple things go differently, and as bad as they played, I think they come back and win, or at least it's kind of, actually, in reality, it's probably mirrors, just because how much of this game mirrored in a worse way a lot of our other losses. So they probably have a furious comeback and end up a point short and the missed field goal cost us or whatever, but I don't know. What I do know, man, is I don't want to say this. There is a group of Packer fans, I don't know how many percent, 30%, 40% of Packer fans, that just come out of the woodwork to bitch. And I dislike those fans more than I dislike like 30% of the fans of our division rivals. I can actually talk to those people. There is a group of Packer fans, present company excluded. That's all you listening to, right? Love you all. But I can't handle it because it's friendly fire. It's even more infuriating.
Well, I think the biggest thing for me, too, is that it's entirely irrational, and they try to act like the smartest people in the room. They wait for bad things to happen and then attack Packer fans with nonsense. It's just, you have to understand what you're doing. And I don't know that any of you really take the time to realize what you're doing. You act like Bears fans. You lie in wait and you hide when the Packers do well. Right? You hide out in social media. You maybe pop out once in a while when Packers fan gets happy to make sure that they know how stupid they are. And to make sure, because you're so upset. You're trying to hide, but you're so upset to see Packer fans happy that you lash out. And you sit around and you wait and you wait and you wait. And you have to wait for a long time because the Packers win most of their games. And then eventually the Packers will lose, and that's when you have your moment. That's when you get happy and excited and you get to jump out and do your thing. I mean, you understand how stupid that is, right? For people that try to position themselves as the most rational. Beyond that, I don't know that there are a lot of very rational negative fans. I mean, the entire point of everything that you're doing is you're so irrational. Everything about you is irrational. It's the fact that you have to position your fandom in such an idiotic and upside down way is in and of itself irrational. So, I mean, that's the part that bothers me. Every fan should have some level of honesty within themselves about the situation. There's almost no fan base in the history of the world that ever gets to sit back and go, well, we're perfect. So, I guess there's not much to talk about. That's not real. The problem with negative fans is they expect that to be their life. And when that isn't their life, they just say that everything's awful. And it's irrational.
And I don't know, Joe Blow in the YouTube comment section. Yeah, dude, you know everything because you played tight end for 3 snaps when you were a sophomore. Shut up. Look, the truth of the matter is I do think the Packers probably...
It is funny how many of them like to tell you how much they played ball as though that means anything, right? First of all, there are people that played in the NFL that are idiots. They're really stupid. In fact, they will break down film and I will watch it and I will say, I'm sorry, I didn't play in the NFL. You did, and I will concede that, but we're watching the exact same thing, and I'm telling you that you're wrong about exactly what you're saying right now. And the whole point behind this, and this is a much bigger issue that extends well beyond football, is that what I've learned about human beings is that, and maybe this is just a current cultural thing, truth is a very small thing to most people. And so the appeal to authority is a terrible thing, especially today, because most people will form opinions outside of reality. They will build it based on political opinions or whatever opinions that they have for whatever reasons that they have it. And it's not hard to figure that out when you are a fan of a team, what that reason might be, or if you're a negative fan, what that reason might be. And so whether you played in the NFL, whether you played in high school, whether you played in college, it doesn't matter to me, because I know that for most people, and it may not be true in a very few cases, but it's true enough that I'm never going to take anybody's word for it just because they have some experience with a thing. Because I know how powerful bias is. So I don't care. Beyond that, how many people have we heard talk about, well, I would know I played ball. Know what? You didn't even go back and rewatch the game. You sat on your butt and watched it from the couch where you have no vantage point of anything. Why is it that we think that when somebody has some level, even a small level of experience in anything, they become omniscient? They become an all-knowing being that can see the present, the future, the past. They have all 22, all 360 vision. They can see beyond. They can see into the heart and the mind of the people. They know the route and the concepts. They understand what the play call was and why. They understand exactly how this is coached and why and how. Bro, what are you talking about, dude? And again, they didn't even go back and watch it. These are people that you know, they maybe played high school ball and now they sit around and drink beer and watch football games and just get mad that their team isn't winning Super Bowls all the time and then want to piss and moan. And then when they're losing an argument, they slap down the I played high school ball card like I'm supposed to be impressed by that. Now, there's nothing wrong with it if you actually take your experience and try to use that to build on it and actually learn more about football, as many people have done. There's a lot of very smart people. And by the way, most of them, as far as I know, they really didn't play ball. They probably started playing Madden. That's where a lot of these guys get involved in scheme and all that kind of stuff, and they use that to kind of build on. Now, would I ever take somebody's word for something because they play Madden? No. But that's my point. Like, if somebody that is a film person wants to come to me and have an intellectual discussion about something and say, well, here, let's take a look at it. Let's look at the film. Let's look at the stats. Let's look at this and that. Here's why I came to my conclusion. Fine. I've never seen a negative fan do that ever. Ever. To be fair, very few positive fans do that either. Vast majority of opinions that I'm aware of are just completely random and arbitrary, but it's upsetting because they're so positive and they're so, I don't mean positive in a good way. I mean, they're so sure of themselves and they're so angry and hostile and attacking and they have no footing whatsoever. It's like going off to war and dying for a cause, fighting for a god that somebody that came to your doorstep told you about yesterday. Like, hey, my name's Jim, and just want to tell you about this god I invented. His name is Shakrakru, and he's actually an alien, but he's like a god alien, super powerful, and he's going to come down to Earth and take everything over, but he wants us to clear a way for him. So if you could take this gun and we're going to go fight some people and it's going to be great. And you go out and you just start blasting, just start taking a bunch of people out and then you get killed in the process. Like, what are you doing? It's like Shakrakru, bro. What is Shakrakru? It's like, well, it's a god. How do you know? I just believe it. I just believe it. He said it and then I believed it because I'm an intellectual and I'm the smart one and you're just a bootlicker that doesn't believe. Okay. Got it. Yeah. No, you're super, super rational about everything.
We would have got it rolling. But to sit here and say that there was no circumstances like that these guys are just robots, that they aren't affected by things. For example, right? When you see your teammate leave on the cart with a head injury. Joe Blow out there is, oh, you got to play. You're professional. Yeah, dude. Your dude just scrambled his brain in front of you. You're all down there praying for his life. These are humans. Like, things unfolded yesterday that really sucked. Outside of football really sucked. And they're going to impact your players. Not to mention just running out of bodies from an X's and O's standpoint. Hold on, I'm going to call you back.
I'll give you one more call back, Kyle.
But yeah, I mean, so yes, they're running out of bodies, but like there is an emotional impact. We want these guys to be Madden simulation players. But I'm sorry, you keep watching guys leaving on carts. You know, you lose Watson last week. You know, I'm sorry, but we've seen this time and time again. The emotional impact of that always impacts play. It does. I mean, it just does. And these guys aren't robots. I'm not excusing them. They're not absolved of all their mistakes and things. But between just some awful, awful catastrophic calls by the referees, some just excruciatingly just painful and emotionally damaging injuries to players. And then the replacement, I mean, when Monk and Glover are out there just holding on every play because they can't hold up against a tremendous Philadelphia line, dude, it's like sometimes this ain't your day. You know what I mean? And lashing out and screaming about how garbage your team is and this, that, and the other thing, that upsets me more than the freaking loss, almost. You know? Yes, it sucks. Let's not pretend like we weren't a good team this year. We were a good team this year. We weren't a great team, but we were a good team this year. And unfortunately, for a lot of different reasons we're going to explore for a couple months here, we just, at the end, we weren't there, right? But I just can't handle it when it's friendly fire and it's just, like, what we can talk about, like, the quarterback playing crappy, offensive line depth, all that stuff. We can talk about that, but, like, screaming and gnashing your teeth and wetting yourself and crying in all caps and every social media platform you can, man, it gets old. Like, have a little freaking self-respect, you know? Be a little bit classier than that. Anyway, I just need to vent. All right, buddy. Peace.
But yeah, and again, this comes down to the irrationality thing. It's kind of what I talked about before. After Minnesota and Detroit got bounced, the immediate reaction from the negative fans wasn't just to jump in with everybody else and celebrate and say, yay. It was, number one, I got told to shut my mouth because we lost to them, which, you know, kind of wanted to stab that douchebag. I have a temper. Number two was, well, I guess we were even worse than I thought. Bro, we weren't bad. You understand this is one of the best seasons we've had. This is an 11-win football team. That's not a minor thing. It's an 11-win football team. Some of the best statistics we've had, just baseline statistics, as well as, again, go to more advanced things like DVOA, one of the best football teams we've fielded. They fell apart at the end. That's true. But if you take the season as a whole, it's a good football team. Okay, that's my evidence. What's yours? Well, who did they beat? Okay, that's a stupid argument. Well, who did they beat? Well, I could tell you who they beat, and you would say it doesn't matter. First of all, it's so idiotic to pretend, because you're doing the same thing now to Minnesota and Detroit. They lost one game. They each lost one game, and now their entire season means they were bad. You're that freaking dense. These are elite football teams. Detroit got decimated with injuries. Oh, it's not an excuse. Well, it is an excuse. It's absolutely an excuse. Of course it's an excuse. What the hell are you talking about? It's the reason they lost. How about that? If somebody loses their quarterback and then they lose in a playoff game, you're going to tell me that that's not an excuse? Of course it is. You're still expected to win. I understand the next man up mentality. That's not the point. I'm not asking you to give them a free pass to the next round. That's not the point. It's very obviously the reason that they didn't make it to the next round. And if you look at the team that they built, it's more than talented enough to go on to the next level. If you give them, if they had the same amount of injuries as everybody else, or if it was strength against strength, they're better than everybody else. I'm sorry to tell you, Detroit is unbelievably, amazingly elite football team. And we all dodged a bullet that they got bounced the first time around. And the only reason they lost is because Goff went to 0. If Goff just doesn't implode, they win. Even with all the injuries, they still win. Same with Minnesota. If Darnold doesn't explode, they win. If Love didn't explode, we win. If Lamar didn't implode, then Baltimore would have won. I didn't watch that whole game, but I saw the turnovers. This year really does seem to be coming down to, in the playoffs, who can have their quarterback not implode. And Philadelphia has failed that test twice and has been carried to victory twice, thanks to both quarterbacks being worse than he was. Man, they had that game won. And then I think it was after the safety. That game, in my opinion, was pretty well wrapped up. And then it was 2 turnovers. It was a fumble, and then they scored points, and then quarterback comes out and fumbles, and they get the ball back and score again. And at that point, and they still almost lost. Anyways, no, it's absurd to pretend that the Packers didn't have a good year. Yes, if you just zoom in on the last 3 games, putrid football team. Is that what you want to do, or do you want to look at the year as a whole? Do you want to look at the team as a whole? This is the problem with the negative fans, and it's no different than the positive fans from the other perspective, though. You only zoom in on the negative and then extrapolate that out over everything. You say, this is all that there is. The worst version of Jordan is the only version of Jordan. The worst version of LaFleur is the only version of LaFleur. There's somebody talking about when I was making fun of, every time coaches now are emotional, I just point out how, I thought our guy was emotional. Vikings, I told you guys. Well, look at the Vikings coach on the other sideline. He's not being emotional because they're winning by 20, you moron. What do you want him to do? Weep and wail and gnash his teeth on the sideline? We're winning by 20. Are you that dense? But guess what happens when the Vikings are losing? Their head coach is flailing around and being all emotional, and then I made fun of him for it. We've never seen it before. Only LaFleur's ever done that. Anyways, the Lions coach goes to the podium, immediately starts crying again. Never seen a bigger, tougher pansy in my life. These guys try so hard. Bro, you gotta lay off the drugs, bro. Freaking steroids and 60 gallons of caffeine are just a bad combo, I think. He's just crashing out, man. He's all hyped up the whole game. And he comes back and he's just crashing. Anyways, I made that comment, and somebody comments below like, well, Matt LaFleur allows his emotions to get a hold of him at the worst times so that he makes the dumbest decisions. Okay, give me the examples. Can you do that? Or are you just saying stupid crap? Because the way that my mind works, and I wish this is how everybody's mind worked, is when you make a claim like that, my mind immediately goes to how would I prove or disprove this? And as soon as you think that, I'm hoping you're keeping up with me here, you immediately recognize how overwhelmingly impossible that would be. Because you would have to identify every single point at which a decision needs to be made, which technically is every single play. So you could almost highlight every single positive play as you being incorrect. But let's assume you're only talking about 3rd down, 4th down, go for it, challenge. The challenges. Oh my goodness. Which again, it becomes problematic when you have to prove not only that he's responsible for it as opposed to the other people around him, but also that emotion was the reason for him making a decision that didn't turn out in his favor, which you can't do. But again, it's not about being rational. People that are mad about Matt LaFleur being emotional and allowing that to dictate their decision-making are commenting on my stuff because of their emotion, being dictated to because of their inability to control their emotions. All right, why don't we take a break? Kyle, I'm going to skip over your next 3 calls here just to kind of keep things moving along a little bit. We'll come back, and we got Drew and Ashwaubenon.
Hey Ryan, that's Drew from Green Bay, and just got done watching the Rams blow up the Vikings 27-9. That was a good consolation prize, I'm not going to lie. And it wasn't even, the score doesn't even really tell the whole story. It was a much bigger blowout than that. But in terms of how that impacts the Packers, that actually moves us up 1 draft spot because the Rams would have been below us or before us. Mm-hmm. So now we're the 23rd overall pick instead of 24th overall pick. So that's exciting. I can't wait for the draft. Can't wait to hear some of these mock drafts and get into the film and all that. I watched a lot of the games, but, it was kind of interesting, too. There was a storyline. I didn't hear too many people talking about, but last year the Vikings took Dallas Turner 2 spots before, I believe, the Rams took Jared Verse, and Jared Verse made a Pro Bowl, and Dallas Turner didn't do nearly as much for the Vikings, and Jared Verse had a huge impact on this game, and I don't watch the whole thing, but I didn't really see too much by Dallas Turner. So, anyways, have a good one. It'll be interesting to hear what you think about that. Bye.
Well, and I think that's just the kind of perspective that people need to have. I mean, look, at some point you expect to have hits, and I don't disagree with that. At some point you want to get your Jared Verse or your Chop Robinson. It's not okay to just never get it. But every time anybody else has success, some Packer fans want to make this about, look at what they get and what do we get. What happened to the Vikings happens all the time. And we can certainly make fun of them for it. You took Dallas Turner and he's not that good, and Chop and Verse are better. That stuff happens all the time. And here's the other thing that's funny about it. I would not be very surprised if the Rams and Vikings had switched place, if the Rams would have taken Dallas Turner over Jared Verse. They probably would have. And they would have gotten it wrong. And they kind of just accidentally got the right guy because of the situation. And even with the Cooper DeJean thing, Cooper DeJean fell in the second round. If anybody was right about Cooper DeJean and what he would have been, he wouldn't have made it to the second round. He probably wouldn't have made it out of the top 10. So all 32 teams were wrong about Cooper DeJean. All of them were wrong. You know, we want to give credit to all these genius GMs for getting it right and our GM for being a complete and stupid idiot. So much of this crap is luck. And we want to pretend that it isn't, especially when it's somebody that everybody liked, like Cooper DeJean. Well, everybody knew. No, they didn't. Everybody in this draft thing likes to pretend that they know, and they don't know a damn thing. And they have amnesia when it comes to stuff that they get wrong. And boy, they're locked in like a freaking elephant when they get something right. Which again, they didn't even necessarily get it right. They just got lucky. Like, am I right if I just list off every single draft prospect and just talk about how they're going to be elite? And then when 10 of them turn out to be really good players, I can just say, see, I told you. Was I right really about any of them? Not really. I mean, if that was the case, I could just go around doing that, and I'd have a 100% hit rate on every good prospect in the world. I can go back, which, by the way, a lot of guys do that. That's what's so funny about the draft, because the reality is most of the players in the draft end up being pretty bad football players, if they ever even touch a football field. But during draft time, everybody's a stud. Certainly every first-round pick, but the second, third, fourth round guys, like these guys, oh, he's really talented. He's da. And for a lot of these guys, it's about, just kind of being nice or acknowledging the positive qualities or whatever the case may be. But in reality, you're going to be wrong more often than you're right. And again, I don't know that I can even call it right if you're not actually being honest. You're just, you're just guessing, and a couple of your guesses happen to correlate with reality. But in my opinion, in order to actually be right, the process of analysis also has to be right, and that isn't the case. And that certainly isn't the case with Cooper DeJean either, because the same process to analyze Cooper DeJean probably went in to analyze Terrion Arnold, who is a terrible corner right now. So for the people that said DeJean is good but not as good as Terrion Arnold, are they right or are they wrong? There are no certainties in any of this. There is no exact science to this. The NFL draft is almost entirely a crapshoot. And that's what I've been saying too, as far as that's why process is so important. Because all you can really do is try to line yourself up in the best possible position to give yourself a slight edge, so that if every pick just came down to completely random, whatever, you try to end up on the best side of that. Try to manipulate trades. Try to make sure you have the most picks, because that's the best way to secure that you end up with good players, is to just give yourself the most amount of attempts. Earlier picks are better than later picks. Now, some of that is counterintuitive, because in order for somebody to be an earlier pick, you would have to assess their talent level. But that's kind of inherent in the problem to begin with, because everybody kind of has the same process. All the tools you have to assess, everybody else has. So everybody's got the same list. So when you pick at this spot, everything's kind of set in stone. You could almost just kind of, random simulate your way through, just like you do with a lot of these mock draft simulators. I like to pretend that good GMs have this magical ability to just know. They don't know. They have some knowledge that is beyond our ability to see things, but not much more of an ability to see beyond what other GMs and their entire squads of people have. So even the good GM, bad GM debates, I don't know, man. I think a lot of it really comes down to luck. I really do. And that's why these things tend to ebb and flow. That's why, again, Schneider is my favorite example. John Schneider out in Seattle, he made his bones as an elite GM. Why? Because over the course of about 2-3 years, he just had these drafts that were unbelievable. Just everybody hit. And then after that, he was just dog crap. Why? Did he forget how to do it? Or did he just kind of get lucky over the course of a couple drafts? And so even from, you can look at it from two perspectives. One, being too hard on a GM is always going to be stupid, but also putting too much faith, in Goot we trust. There's only so much trust you can put in a guy. Again, a lot of my trust in Gutekunst doesn't even come down to his ability to evaluate talent, although I think from a pro personnel standpoint, there is some evaluation, and I think he does a great job with that, free agency. From a college level, it becomes much more of a crapshoot, and from there, it's largely about process. Evaluation's important, obviously, and there's certainly potentially some issues with process with Gutekunst as well, where you're starting to see, or not even starting, but there are some areas where he's performing less than others, that maybe it's a process issue, I don't know. You can talk first round, third round, whatever. But at the end of the day, it's, there are some basic rules I expect you to follow. And number one is he always has 1 billion picks. That's critically important. A lot of these teams have no pick. I mean, the reason we're allowed to have 11 every year is because there's a bunch of other teams with bad GMs that give away all their picks. It's a zero-sum game, man. We can't just accumulate. Everybody can't accumulate more picks. It's impossible. If you get one, somebody else loses one. So, I don't know. Anyways, you're always happy when other guys tend to fail. And there's certainly GMs that are bad, and a lot of that does come down to process. Like, their hits just miss, or their picks just miss all the time, in which case you got to get rid of somebody because they're just, somewhere along the line, their evaluation process is just broken. But there is an upper limit that you can't go above. And a guy that just has an elite draft, it's not really a skill thing. It's a luck thing. If you hit on all your picks, it's. I mean, if Goot does it, I'm going to give him credit and be like, yeah, Gutekunst, you did it. It's entirely a luck thing. You can't hit on all your picks based on skill. It's not possible. That's why nobody has that skill. Well, somebody did. Okay, great. Did they do it next year and every year for the rest of their career? No. Exactly. It's not a skill.
Ryan, your Uncle Milty here.
What's up?
I'll have to eat crow on my theory.
Uh-oh.
Packers looked a lot like they did the last few weeks. Question for you. Got a working hypothesis. Compared to last season, and we'll need both numbers, how many under-center play-action passes did the Packers run last year compared to this season with Jordan Love, the quarterback? If the number's significantly lower this year, my hypothesis is Love had meaningful lower leg injuries that limited his mobility. And those Shanahan offense under center play action plays require the quarterback to do a lot of sprinting and cutting. I wonder if that had something to do with it, because the entire offense is built on that sort of thing. So those numbers might be insightful.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked, because there's definitely an obsession with the play action thing here. Let's go ahead and look at this. 2023, Jordan Love ran play action 26.6% of the time. He had an 85.3 PFF grade. He ran no play action 73.4% of the time, had a 78.1 grade. In 2024, 24.4% of the time play action, had a 69 grade. No play action, 75.6, 74 grade. So the not running play action was almost identical. So as far as the percentages, they ran at almost the exact same amount of time, right? 25% or 24% compared to 26%. It's nearly identical. We ran it slightly more last year. The biggest difference is, and this is what's funny, because everybody's like, why didn't we run more play action? Why didn't we run more play action? Because Jordan was kind of bad at it. Now, maybe that's kind of maybe that's kind of the point, that he just couldn't do it as well. I don't really know. But if you look at the non-play action passing as far as how he performed, he had a 78 passing grade last year with no play action. That went down to a 74. So it got marginally worse. If you look at his play action, it went from an 85 passing grade down to a 69 passing grade. So everything got worse for Jordan Love this year. But play action fell off an absolute cliff. It used to be he was way better at play action. This time around, he was worse at play action. So, you know, there's something where it didn't work as well. They did run it as much, so that's not a thing. But, you know, maybe there is a thing where they wanted that to work better and it didn't, and maybe that has to do with the injury. I have no idea. But the reality is, and the fact that we should have run it more, first of all, no, because this is just a made-up thing. But also, no, we shouldn't run it more because he's worse when we run play action. He went from 1,600 yards down to 1,000 yards, 12 touchdowns, 3 interceptions compared to 6 touchdowns, 1 interception. He had 5.1% big-time throw rate, 2.1% turnover-worthy play rate. That was 2.5%, like 50. It was a 50% reduction in big-time throw rate, and his turnover-worthy play rate went from 2.5 up to 3.2. So, no, the number was not significantly lower. It was almost identical. However, he was significantly worse at it. All right, let's take a break. We'll come back. We got Daniel from California.
Hey, Ryan, Daniel from California.
Yo.
Just listening to the episode on Tuesday, you know, talking about the DNA of the team, and I don't know, man, like, because I know you're talking about how a lot of it goes back to the Mike McCarthy era, right, of guys not showing up, but, you know, except for, like, maybe 2014, that's probably, like, the last legitimate, like, McCarthy team. Most of those teams, they didn't have the horses, right? Like, our defense, most of those years, weren't very good. We didn't have the corners. We didn't have the...
What corners do we have right now? Are you kidding me? We don't have any corners right now. And yes, we did have corners in the past. All right, let me ask you this honestly. Which corners would you rather have? Valentine or Charles Woodson? Stokes or Tramon Williams? Keyshawn Nixon or Al Harris? Because that is the defense that imploded in 2009. They had Nick Collins and Nick Barnett and Clay Matthews and Johnny Jolly and Cullen Jenkins and Bigby and Hawk and Desmond Bishop. Even 2011, which was seen as a bad defense, had Woodson, Williams, and Shields. I mean, I can't think of too many years where we've had worse corners than we have right now. I know the defense performed well thanks to our defensive coordinator, but to say that we have the horses this year compared to other years, we have no horses. We have a linebacker that's really good, and that's, what, is that it? The corners are bad. We had a good safety, one. The rookie wasn't that good and was injured. He's massively overhyped. Bullard was terrible. We had no one pass rusher that could do anything. No interior pass rush. All the other linebackers outside of Edgerrin were god-awful with the exception of Quay's run defense in about 3 or 4 games. And only his run defense. And here's the thing. It's not even that the defense didn't show up. It did. I don't have an issue with what the defense did.
Pass rush a lot of those years, like 15, 16, 17. There was a lot of major flaws in those teams. And yeah, I'm not saying we don't...
Well, hold on. 15 was the first, like, hiccup year for the Packers. So we're kind of cherry-picking, like, one down year for the Packers. 16 was a pretty good year. 17 was the year Rodgers got hurt. So that year, I don't even think we made the playoffs that year. Did we in 17? I don't think so. And I think 16 was the one good year we got out of Nick Perry, if I'm not mistaken. Or maybe it was 17. Well, 16 was the year that he got double-digit sacks. It was his 1 year. So I'm thinking maybe 16, 17 is what got him his contract. We also had Julius Peppers that year. We had Clay Matthews was... I mean, in comparison, Clay Matthews would be about as good of any pass rusher we had on the team. He had 40 pressures and 6 sacks on 393 attempts. He's just above 10%. I mean, that's about what we got from Rashawn. Julius was 45 pressures, 485 attempts, so that's sub 10%, but 9 sacks. Nick Perry had 51 pressures on 461 attempts and 12 sacks. So we had kind of a trio that would be certainly better than any 3 guys that we had this year. That's not even to mention Mike Daniels on the inside. He was sub 10% as far as his pressures. He was right about there, 47 on 482, but a very good run defender, as was Nick Perry, 83 run defense. Mike Daniels, 78 run defense. Morgan Burnett, 78 run defense. Blake Martinez, 74. HaHa Clinton Dix with a 90 run defense grade. I mean, this was a phenomenal. We had, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We had 14 guys with 70 run defense grades or higher, which is just crazy. I think this was also Kenny's first year, was it? Which Kenny was pretty good coming out. We kind of slow rolled him that first year. His first year was 2016. Yeah, so 2016 was his rookie year. That was when he came in the postseason and he started to become kind of whatever. And remember, he was 75, then 87, and then 90 was his first 3 years, and then he started to fall off after that. So Kenny's first 3 years, he was actually quite good. After that, not so much. I mean, we were missing pieces, no doubt about it. But if we actually go back and look at who we're talking about, dude, I don't know what pieces we have right now that we actually really like. We're talking about revamping our entire pass rush, revamping our entire defensive line, revamping our entire cornerback group. I mean, everything except safety and one linebacker. I mean, I don't know.
Have flaws, but those teams didn't not show up. Those teams those teams weren't good enough. For example,
I don't buy that for a second. Those teams were very good and then just imploded. I mean, that was all the time that happened.
2019, yeah, that team might have not been good enough, but it's the same team as 2020, right?
No, I don't think so. I mean, Rodgers alone. I mean, look at the offense. 2019. I mean, 2020 was one of the more dominant offenses. I think 2020 might have been a better offense than 2011. It was a significantly better team. I mean, Aaron Rodgers, yes, it's the same human being, but Aaron Rodgers in 2019 and Aaron Rodgers in 2020 were entirely different animals.
And they didn't show up again. But how many different guys between?
No, 2019 they weren't. 2019, I don't think they were good enough. I mean, they got embarrassed in that game, I think, against the 49ers. But they weren't better than the 49ers. 2020, they were better than everybody. They were somewhat of an unstoppable force. But, I mean, if we want to talk about, they just didn't have the horses, I mean, the defense was pretty bad in 2020 as well. Certainly worse than several Mike McCarthy defenses. And ultimately, we lost to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 26-31. I mean, not a terrible defense, I guess, but they were ranked 13th in points. So, I mean, they weren't top 10 or anything.
2019 and 2020, what's the big difference? It's just another year in the LaFleur system. But
well, it's a huge difference in terms of the quality of the teams, that's for sure.
They didn't show up then. 2021, we had our best chance to make it. The NFC was weak that year, and our best guys didn't show up. I don't know. The one thing that I know LaFleur likes to talk about, it's one game at a time, and you treat every game like it's the most important thing. And yes, I think that is a good philosophy, but the playoffs is not just another game, all right? I know he probably says, it's one game at a time. Look at this game. You don't look ahead. It's the playoffs, but it's just I don't know. It's just got to be bigger than that. Because it doesn't make...
Well, look, I mean, first of all, I think just on its face, the fact that McCarthy never had the horses is kind of silly. McCarthy had powerhouse teams that at the beginning of the year were very often picked to win the Super Bowl almost every single year. Mike McCarthy and Aaron Rodgers were the favorite pick of everybody. It stopped becoming that toward the end, but since 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016, all you'd ever hear at the beginning of the year, I got the Packers in the Super Bowl. And then they go in, they would beat the crap out of people. They'd waltz right into they'd obviously win the division. They'd waltz into the playoffs very easily. To act like they didn't have a good enough team to do anything is on its face just kind of silly. Of course they did. They were in the playoffs, and they got into the playoffs every year, and they got in the playoffs every year because they were a very good football team. And they didn't just beat enough bad teams to get in. That's not true. They beat whoever they need to beat. Nobody doubted that they had the ability to go on to win, and they just didn't get it done when it mattered the most. I mean, if they just didn't have the horses, they wouldn't have gone to the playoffs every year. But they did.
Makes sense because it's not just a playoff thing, right? It's a regular season thing. It's just there's some sort of DNA in the team, and I don't believe that it's a McCarthy thing because a lot of those defenses were not good.
By the way, have you seen the defenses? When have we had a good defense outside of this year? Matt LaFleur has not had a good defense except for this year. And the defense did show up this year, and it's because of the defensive coordinator. Mike McCarthy has had more good defenses and certainly much higher quality defensive players than Matt LaFleur has ever had.
Yeah, sometimes the offense didn't show up, but I believe that's a
And I don't know if I said it. Did you see the Dallas Cowboys? If we're going to say it's not a Mike McCarthy trait.
chemistry and a makeup of an Aaron Rodgers thing where it's like you don't want to beat them by playing, you want to beat them by scheme, right? So when there's a quality team that can show up and shut down Rodgers, like they can't just go out and beat them. Like I just felt like that was the Rodgers offense DNA, right? If you could actually like beat them schematically, the Packers couldn't beat you physically. So I don't know. I'm not blaming them.
All right, yeah, I'll get you another call back here.
Hey, Ryan, Daniel from California. Man, I'm just thinking about the whole Jordan Love thing, and like, because last year, right, he has a good first game against the Bears, a couple decent games where they're in it, right, and then they just get destroyed by the Lions week 4, I think, or week 5, whatever it was. And after that, he just, like, he wasn't having, like, and that's the thing about all this. Like, he doesn't have bad PFF grades, right? He's got 140 grade this year, and then he's got a couple 50s, I think, but they're not bad. They're not horrible grades. There's not, but, you watch it, and it's just, stuff's off, and you listen to Matt LaFleur sometimes in press conferences, and it's like, well, the receiver, they didn't carry the route right. It's just like, I don't know. It's all off. But
and there's a good example of that too. And Matt LaFleur ticks me off because he likes to protect the quarterback, and then everybody listens to him, and they immediately rush to see Pac Daddy was wrong because he said it was the receiver's fault and everything's fine. There was, and I didn't hear him say this, but I know I was talking to my half Mexican attorney, and he said Matt LaFleur blamed the interception on the player cutting the route the wrong depth or something. I went back and watched it, and I sent it to him, and I said, you tell me what the hell he's talking about here. And he couldn't do it. It's indefensible. There's absolutely no reason to ever throw that pass anywhere, and nobody could have cut a route anywhere to make that make sense. Here's what I do think happens. I think sometimes somebody will make a mistake that is in addition to the interception, not causing the interception, but also this thing happened, and they'll use that as an excuse, right? Kind of like, cop pulls you over, and you're like, you pulled me over for no reason. It's like, that's not true. And then they go walk around your car, they do all this stuff, they run your plates, and then they find this little thing or whatever, and they're like, oh, look, you don't have a little light over your license plate. Like, what? They're like, yeah, that's why I pulled you over. No, it's not why you pulled me over. You just found that after the fact. Whether or not this guy ran at the right route or the right this or the right that, there was another interception too. So there was, 2 interceptions in this game? I get them confused because somebody posted, I have this one emblazoned in my brain and it never even happened in the game because somebody posted it. And it was the first one I was going to defend LaFleur or Jordan a little bit because it was like, yeah, Musgrave didn't do the right thing. There was no interception to Musgrave. Somebody posted it and it wasn't even for the game and it ticks me off because now I have it burned into my head as an interception that happened in this game. But anyways, There was the very obvious one. Oh, he did throw 3 interceptions. I don't remember the third one, but so there was 2 of them where the receiver kind of got blamed. One of them was the very obvious one that hit a linebacker, and that was the one where it's like, well, there should have been a guy that cut a route that was this out of the completely stupid. It doesn't matter what anybody was supposed to do. That ball was getting intercepted 100 times out of 100. Then there was another one for Wicks down the right sideline. And it's like, well, he was supposed to take an inside release instead of an outside release. Okay. Here's my biggest issue with that. He took the outside release before you threw it. So you saw he had the outside release. So you either 1, shouldn't throw it, or 2, should throw it as though he took an outside release. When you throw it inside and short, after you stare at him and see that he took the outside release, I no longer can blame the receiver entirely for this mistake. Because you just saw what happened. You're looking at it. I can see you throwing it after he took that release. But what happens? Matt LaFleur will go to the podium and say, well, you got a guy that took an outside release, he's supposed to take an inside release. So, you can't just blame the quarterback for everything. Yes, I can, though. I can blame the receiver for making the mistake that he made. I can still blame Jordan Love for throwing an interception on a play where he very clearly threw the ball incorrectly that led to an interception. I could understand if he threw the ball, just frickin' mortared that thing as soon as he got the ball before the guy even took a release. Just this frickin' trick shot where he just watch this and throws it up there and is like, just wait, it's going to land exactly where he ends up. And then he gets out and he breaks and goes to the outside release and Jordan's like, no, I threw it as though it was an inside release like a second ago. But that's not what happened. So yeah, it gets annoying when there's all these explanations of it's like, well, it's not his fault because somebody should have done something differently on that play. Yeah, but also it's his fault. Sometimes no, and that's true sometimes. And I think you could probably argue that sometimes. Like the Jaden Reed kind of hesitating on the, even though I don't know if that was picked or I think it was just incomplete or whatever, but there was a play where it's like, how did you miss him so bad? And then you look at it, it's like, it kind of looked like he hesitated a bit. If you're throwing with some anticipation and timing and maybe they don't run at the right angle or they come out of their break a little slow or whatever, that those things can be a problem. But when you see what's happening, and then you decide after seeing what happened to throw it, and then you throw it there, and it gets intercepted, I don't care. And that really ticks me off about Matt LaFleur, because that happened through the entire Aaron Rodgers era, too. I'm watching Aaron Rodgers make massive mistakes and do really stupid things, and he comes out and blames everybody in the world except the quarterback. And that really ticks me off. And I understand he doesn't like it that the quarterbacks get all the blame for everything, but the problem is he comes out and he just flat out lies about everything. And then all the quarterback defenders, just like all the Aaron Rodgers defenders got to say, see, haha, you're an idiot. Now all the Jordan Love defenders get to come out and say, ah, see, you're an idiot. And it's like, no, Matt LaFleur's lying to you. He's just lying to you. Ticks me off.
Like with Jordan last year, the Lions wrecked him, and he was bad for 4 or 5 weeks, 6 weeks, and then he started getting his confidence back, went on a run. This year, he threw some interceptions week 1, but I thought he started pretty strong. Out till the Vikings game, he's playing hurt for a few weeks, seeing ghosts, trying not to get injured, just trying to play hero ball. I don't know, man. I just can't.
Well, let's track this a little bit, because you brought up a couple things, and I'm looking at his PFF grades right now. First thing that you mentioned, I forgot to comment on, is his grades aren't bad. He's got a couple, but there's not really bad, and I think you're right, but that's also a problem, because good quarterbacks aren't characterized by just not being bad. Not being bad is a good thing as far as consistency is concerned, because being 90-40, 90-40 is not great. But being 61, 61, 52, 65, 65, 70, 65, that's not a good quarterback. That's a freaking backup quarterback right there. Good quarterbacks are characterized by being good, like having 70s and 80s and doing that consistently. So Jordan started off rough. The Eagles game was bad. That was a 65. But then he immediately gets hurt. Comes back in Minnesota. Not the greatest game. 67 passing grade. And then 40 against LA. So we look at that and we just say, well, he was hurt. We obviously saw he was hurt against Minnesota. LA, I was a little bit skeptical. He played like absolute garbage, but he kind of pulled up on one of them. So it's like, all right, fine. Fine, he's hurt. Then against Arizona, it starts to improve. If you look at his grades, it's 70, 70, 70, 60, 70, 60, 70, 80. Now, again, that's not great. This isn't elite quarterback. It's low 70s, 72. And as far as his passing, it's 69, 71, 73, 79 against Detroit. He had a 68 overall because of, a fumble, but whatever. I don't care. I care about you as a passer. 79, so that was a good game. 72, 61, 76, 83. So there was a stretch, you could say, from Houston to Detroit, where he was at least good and had a couple really good games with one game against San Francisco mixed in. So that was kind of like, okay, this is pretty solid Jordan right here, right? I wish it was a little higher, not just low 70s pretty much throughout, but we got a 79, a 76, and an 83 mixed in and close together, right? Between week 9 against Detroit and week 14, you got a 79, 76, and an 82. Also with a 72 and a 61. Like that's still a solid stretch right there. After Detroit, something happened. And maybe that's what we really need to focus on. And the last two were definitely the worst. I mean, the last one was by far the worst. But after Detroit, something broke, and I don't know what happened. I don't know if Detroit scared the crap out of him. I don't know what happened. But Detroit was his best game, believe it or not. 83 PFF grade, according to PFF. After that, it was 67, 66, 73, 61, 52. He had one good game through the last 5, and his best game was a 72. He had 185 yards and 1 touchdown. He threw for over 100 yards just twice, one of them being against Philly, which was a terrible game where he had 0 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He had only one game with multiple touchdowns, and he had 2 games out of the 5 with 0 touchdowns. He didn't throw a single touchdown in his last 2 games, and he had 3 interceptions. So over his last 2 games, he had 0 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. In fact, over his last 4 games, he had 2 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. He had a huge stretch of no interceptions, right? It was real bad early on. And then week 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 0 interceptions, right? Not a ton of touchdowns. It was 2-2-1, 2-1-1, and then 0-0. But no interception. Like he got the interception thing figured out, and then it just fell apart. But still, the last 5 games after Detroit, and maybe that's something people can look into. What changed after Detroit? I don't know. Maybe he got hurt. Maybe we'll find out that Jordan tweaked something after week 14. Something happened to his knee. Maybe they changed something as far as the scheme. Did somebody else? Is that when did frickin' I don't know. I don't want to look into it right now, but that's the main thing. You can see the injury, right? Philly, Minnesota, LA. From week 6 to week 14 is pretty good Jordan. After Detroit, something broke. And then after Minnesota, for sure, he really broke. So that'll be something interesting to kind of look into, look at the Christian Watson injury, look at some of Jordan's, look at the injury reports and see kind of what happened. Look at maybe some of the play design, snap counts, this kind of thing, that kind of thing. If something abrupt happened, because it is abrupt, and that's kind of the point. I mean, sometimes just random things happen. That's entirely true. It doesn't have to be something, but something abrupt did take. Everything else makes sense, right? His play reducing in a period where he was clearly injured and then improving. Everything about that period through Detroit makes sense. Everything after Detroit is a giant question mark. And I think, again, like I've been saying a lot recently, and I'll keep banging this drum, we need to spend more time being curious. We spend way too much of our time just saying, well, here's what I think, right? I didn't ask you to just come up with a random thing off the top of your head. Like, why did this happen? Well, here's my thought. Stop doing that. I mean, look, if we have an initial impression, that's fine, but we all have to acknowledge that means absolutely nothing. A lot of work needs to be done to really investigate this. But again, that's something for you guys to chew on, I guess, and then we'll have to investigate that. All right, I'm going to leave you guys with that. I'm going to head out of here. You have a good rest of your day. I will talk to you tomorrow. Have a good one. Bye-bye.